the Fourth and Long Fantasy Brothers.
Welcome in to episode 18 of the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show. Before we get going, please remember, like the video, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, anything you got to do to show some support. My name is Corey, and I am here with my actual brother, Justin.
Hello, this is Justin.
It's episode 18, and it is coming in fast, and we are now approaching week 3 of football, Justin. But boy, I got to ask, how are you? Because this past weekend, it was a rough one.
Man, I think we're going to talk about this past Sunday as being one of the more injury-riddled Sundays in recent memory. My gosh, all the high-profile players going down. If you were able to escape this weekend without any major injuries, man, you were lucky.
Justin, I don't think I've ever seen a week that was as bad as this week was. I mean, it was really, really rough, and it was superstar after superstar going down with really, really severe injuries.
Yeah, we thought that the week prior was bad, right? When we had Michael Thomas and George Kittle and some other guys go down. But man, this week was just as bad, if not worse. I tell you what.
Yeah, Justin, and I think for sure it's definitely going to be one that we're going to remember for a while, and it is going to alter the course of our fantasy seasons in every league that we're in. Justin, why don't we get started? Let's talk about some of the biggest hits that we took this week, and probably the biggest because he's done for the year is the one and only Saquan Barkley.
Yeah, torn ACL for Saquon. You feel for the guy, right? He was pretty much the consensus second or third, maybe even the first pick in some drafts. I know, Corey, that you were touting him as the pick above CMC. You feel for Barkley. I mean, another year, another injury for the guy. I don't know that I necessarily go out and spend my fab on anybody except for Devonta Freeman, who I think we'll get into in just a few minutes, who just recently signed with the Giants.
Yep, more on Freeman later, but another big hit. This one, not as severe, but if the number 1 guy or number 2 guy going down, how about his partner going down for a long stint of time? Justin, what about Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, I can't remember a season where we had the top 2 pretty much consensus fantasy picks go down with longer-term injuries. They're saying a high ankle sprain for CMC, a 4 to 6 week recovery window. Mike Davis is definitely the ad this week on the waiver wire.
And then, Justin, the 1A and the 1B in a San Francisco 49ers running game from last year, they both go down this week. And now we're in a really interesting situation in San Francisco.
I feel for the 49ers, man. They just got ravaged this weekend with injuries. McKinnon's definitely the ad here for this week. I'll get into him in a bit.
Yeah, and then next up, we have one of our high-profile wide receivers. Some people had him as their number 1 wide receiver. That's Devonta Adams in Green Bay.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about Devonta Adams' hamstring injury. He wanted to get back into the game. I guess LaFleur kind of held him back, hoping that he'd be full strength this week. I'm not concerned about that one.
Justin, just when we think Will Fuller is the lead guy in Houston, all of a sudden an injury takes him out of the play, and now we're thinking Brandon Cooks again. What's the news on Will Fuller?
Yeah, hamstring injury for Will Fuller as well, man. This just seems to be a recurring thing with Will Fuller, right? He goes out there, he blows it up for a game, and then he gets hurt. I'm fading him.
Justin, this year I thought I had this year's Kenny Golladay in one man known as Cortland Sutton, but oh boy, the news was terrible this week.
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere, right? I mean, I wasn't really fully expecting the news that we got. The news came out that he had tore up his knee, quote unquote. I think Jerry Jeudy and Noah Fant are the ads here for the Denver Broncos.
Speaking of the Denver Broncos, their leader on the offense, Drew Lock, went down as well.
Yeah, too bad for Drew Lock. They're saying a shoulder injury here for Drew Lock, going to be out for the next couple of weeks. It certainly hurts the outlook of Jeudy and Fant, especially with Sutton now out of the picture here. I'm not too concerned long-term. I think they just got to be cautious. They'll bring Drew Lock back when he's full strength.
Justin, I thought we were seeing the emergence of a new wide receiver 1 in Indy, but got to feel bad for Paris Campbell.
Yeah, PCL injury for Paris Campbell. You feel for the guy. He was really emerging as one of those safety blanket, high target sort of guys for Phillip Rivers. Unsure on what his outlook is in terms of the injury timetable. They haven't yet said if he's going to be out for the season yet. I'd plan, if I own Paris Campbell, for him to be out for at least the next 6 to 8 weeks.
So, Justin, who do you like in his place? You think T.Y. emerges back in, or is T.Y. drop happy and we're going to see maybe the rookie show up?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be a lot of Jonathan Taylor on the ground, maybe Michael Pittman here. T.Y. Hilton's been a bit of a disappointment the first couple of weeks. I don't know if there necessarily is a ad. If I'm looking at the Colts offense as a collective group here, I think I'm just looking at Jonathan Taylor at this point. He's really the guy to own.
Justin, a guy who can never seem to just get it right, has so much potential, but just has never delivered as much as we would expect. Sterling Shepard went down as well.
Yeah, turf toe injury for Sterling Shepard. Never a good injury when it's lower body with a wide receiver. Obviously, I think Darius Slayton's going to be the beneficiary, the main beneficiary here. Not a good look here for the New York Giants. I think it'll take a few weeks until we see Sterling back to full health.
Justin, if the Niners didn't have enough going on, their lead guy, Jimmy Garoppolo, went down as well.
Yeah, Jimmy G went down. They're saying week to week at this point. I mean, man, you feel for the 49ers. Did you hear the story about how they had an MRI truck scheduled to come into practice that Monday and it broke down? And then there was an incident where their plane got hit by something when they were getting ready to take off. Man, it just seems like the Niners are a bit cursed right now.
Yeah, I think the Niners need to stay put. I'd be very nervous with what's going on with them. They just can't seem to catch a break. Speaking of not being able to catch a break, over the past few years, we've seen Tyrod Taylor be given the job of the starting quarterback for a young and up-and-coming team, only to lose it to a rookie. I feel bad for Tyrod because he had apparently some pretty severe chest pains going on. And it seems like we may have seen a changing of the guard in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think Herbert really showed out well against the Chiefs on Sunday. Anthony Lynn's come out now and said that if Taylor is going to be healthy, he's going to be the starter. I think there were some recent reports that came out that they don't expect Taylor to be healthy for week 3. So I think Herbert gets another start here, and he looked promising, man. I think he showed a lot of promise here in his first start.
Yeah, I agree. I'm intrigued. And if he stays the starter, I'm more intrigued by the Los Angeles weapons. Justin, last week, we talked about what we wanted to see in the future. You wanted to see a little bit more about the Rams running back situation. I wanted to see a little bit more about the Chargers running back situation. What'd you learn from the Rams situation, Justin?
Oh, man. Well, again, we didn't even talk about these two guys in the injury segment, but both Cam Akers and Malcolm Brown both got injured as well. Cam Akers with a rib cartilage issue. They're calling him day to day at this point. He could potentially play in week 3. And then Malcolm Brown went out with a finger issue. I think he fractured his finger, and they say that he's expected to play as well. But the dark horse that I didn't even talk about last week, Darrell Henderson, came out of nowhere, put up over 100 total yards, looked pretty good in the process. This just has the smell of a very, very frustrating RBBC for the next number of weeks. I'm going to continue to keep my eye on it. I'm still not totally giving up on Cam Akers. If he can get healthy and take control of the backfield here, I'll feel much better. But I haven't really learned very much, honestly, especially given the injuries from this past week.
Yeah, I think if there's ever a situation in this fantasy season that we're still completely unsure about, it's got to be this Rams running back situation, just because, Henderson was injured week 1. So, writing him off was sort of a bad idea in week 1. And now with Akers and Brown going down, we may all be tempted to want to write them off and say it's Henderson because he looked really good. But I think that would just be a fool's errand right there. I think we just still got to watch.
Yeah, would it surprise you at all if Cam Akers came out this week and put up 100 total yards and a touchdown? It just seems like they're rotating the backs here, very similar to how Baltimore is using their J.K. Dobbin, Ingram, and Gus Edwards sort of rotation. It just seems like a messy situation for the time being.
Yeah, speaking of a situation that's a little more sort of messy, but almost messy in a good way, is the Chargers running back situation. I think both these guys are here to stay, Justin. Joshua Kelly and Austin Eckler seem like they are a big part of the game plan. And I was saying that I was nervous about Eckler last week, and I still am. He's clearly not the workhorse there. It's a split role between him and Joshua Kelly, and both of them look good. Both of them look like they're going to do their jobs quite well. And I think both are going to be viable starters. I think Eckler's ceiling has to come down a lot than what people expected. And I think Joshua Kelly's floor needs to come up a lot higher than people were expecting. What do you think about that, Justin?
Yeah, Joshua Kelly, man, he moved up in terms of snap percentage this week in week 2. He played, I think it was 29% of the snaps week 1 and looked pretty solid. I think he went 12 for 60 on the ground. And then week 2, it was a lot of the same. And he actually ended up playing over 50% of the snaps with Eckler. It's encouraging for a guy that was going undrafted or super, super late in your drafts this year. I think he very well could be an RB2, RB3, a weekly flex option for you here go forward.
Yeah, I think the Chargers have found their Melvin Gordon, and they found it in Joshua Kelly. And so far, he looks to be filling the role quite well.
Yeah, without a doubt. It was a good call.
All right, Justin. Well, with that being said, I think we are ready for today's show. Remember, we are going past, we are going present, and we are going future. So let's get to it.
On today's show,
All right, we continue our weekly format for you this week. Today, Justin and I discuss a past, a present, and a future topic as we reflect on week 2, and we get you prepared for your week 3 matchups. Justin, let's start in the past, and why don't you get us started with the Bills passing offense, which you learned a lot about this past week.
Yeah, second straight week of a really strong showing out of this passing offense on the Buffalo Bills side. We came into the season with that preconceived notion that recency bias approach that this Bills offense was going to be quote unquote run heavy, right? They invested in Zach Moss, bringing back Devin Singletary. We just fully assumed that Josh Allen would continue to be the quarterback he was. And man, I mean, I tell you what, their passing attack has been really great through the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, I'm not going to overreact, right? The matchups have been in their favor so far. They've played the Jets and the Dolphins, and honestly, they're not great. The Jets are looking like they're on their way to a winless season. I think the Dolphins are maybe a couple weeks away from starting Tua at the quarterback position. But Josh Allen, man, has been far better than I expected this year. He's already had 2 300-yard games to start the season. He actually leads the league in passing yards ahead of Matt Ryan. The other nice thing, too, 70% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. But I think the biggest thing that I've noticed with Josh Allen is his deep ball accuracy in 2020 when you compare it to 2019. Now, last year, he was only completing 31% of his balls that went 20-plus yards downfield. This year, he's up to 78% completion on balls 20-plus yards down the field. What an improvement, right? I mean, that's just crazy. Now, I think the main reason why Josh Allen has improved so much down the field is the addition of Stephon Diggs. I think that's been a godsend for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills offense. And we talked about that, Corey, previously, that the Bills have never had a wide receiver like Stephon Diggs. You look at Stephon Diggs, man, this guy is until further notice, in my mind, this guy is a bona fide wide receiver 1 until we see otherwise. He had 9 targets in week 1. He had 13 targets this week in week 2. I don't think he misses Kirk Cousins all that much, to be honest with you. He could be one of the better draft day bargains for 2020. You and I were both preaching the fact that this guy was so incredibly undervalued this year. You got to trust the talent. Diggs is a top 5 talent at the position. I know you and I, Corey, both had him in our top 15 for wide receivers this year when the experts had him in close to the 30 range, which was pretty crazy in my mind. And you look at John Brown too, right? Not just Stephon Diggs, but John Brown has also been really serviceable and a really solid wide receiver too. I think he's also a wide receiver 2 or 3 until further notice. Now the schedule does get a bit more difficult for Buffalo as the season goes on, but man, I'm encouraged.
Yeah, I mean, and if I'm gonna say that I called it on Diggs, I've got to put my foot in my mouth when it comes to Josh Allen, because I was saying that this guy was not going to be worth a quarterback ad in your league. I was thinking he was going to be a waiver wire guy, and I could not have been more wrong with how he's looked. He's looked legitimately good. It's not just the stats, Justin. I mean, this has been a good-looking performance week in and week out from Josh Allen. He doesn't look like he's fumbling over himself. He doesn't look like he's kind of running, like a chicken with his head cut off. He actually looks like he's got there's a semblance of a plan, and he seems to be running that offense with a tremendous amount of confidence. And I don't know. I mean, if you think about it, think about what we're seeing around the league. There's only a few guys that you can kind of pick out who you would say are having MVP seasons. I mean, maybe someone like Aaron Rodgers, maybe someone like Dak Prescott, definitely someone like Russell Wilson. And I think right now, 2 weeks in, you would be remiss if you didn't include Josh Allen in that conversation.
Yeah, I agree completely. He's taken a big step up here this season. The schedule, as I mentioned earlier, has been pretty light for the Bills so far. It'll be really telling to see how he does over these next couple weeks.
And let's keep in mind, right, Ryan Fitzpatrick a few years ago when he was in Tampa was like the top 5 quarterback for a while too. So these things change, stuff evens out, and maybe this is not the way things are going to stay.
Yeah, you gotta take what you've seen so far though and hope that it continues. And I think Josh Allen has shown a lot of improvement. The addition of Diggs has really helped him a lot. It's really helped him grow and evolve into more of a pocket passer who looks really confident in this 2020 season.
Yeah, he does look confident, but I can tell you, Justin, there's some things that happened this past week that can certainly shake your confidence, and that is It's the return, Justin, of the fantasy football that we all remember, right? And sometimes when it comes to it, fantasy football is just one big disappointment after another. Now, week 1 was a really nice intro back into football because a lot of our stars kind of showed up and performed, right? We had a lot of good performances out of guys that we expected good performances out of. But this week, Justin, man, I mean, we're talking Julio Jones, we're talking Adam Thielen, Joe Mixon, Allen Robinson, David Johnson, Todd Gurley, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, Will Fuller. These are guys who were, without a doubt, bona fide fantasy starters who really sort of laid a goose egg on you. Last week, like I said, seemed far more quote-unquote expected, right? What we got out of our guys was a little more consistent. Yes, there were busts. Yes, there were underperformances. But this week, we had superstars who did not show up. And not even considering the injuries, right? Let's just say it, right? This week seemed like an absolute mess for these fantasy starters.
Yeah, you got to stay positive if you own these guys. You can't overreact to 1 or 2 bad weeks, especially, you're looking at a guy like Joe Mixon, who was coming in first round, maybe early second round pick in most fantasy circles as the drafts were happening back in August, September. Just stay patient, man. Trust the talent and realize that sometimes there's going to be those weeks here and there where some of your studs aren't going to perform. Don't overreact. Don't go trading them. Trust the talent. Stick with your gut.
Yep. So it was a little bit back to sort of what we remember with fantasy football. But, like you said, let's not look too much and dwell into the past. Let's look at the present and the future. And Justin, there is one situation over this next week or so before we get started up with week 3 that you really want to consider investing in, huh?
Yeah, man. You feel for the 49ers and the injury situation that unfolded on Sunday for them, whether it was starting off the season here with Deebo Samuel, Richard Sherman. Now they had Bosa go down, Jimmy G go down, Mostert, Coleman, the list goes on and on. We talked earlier about Mostert and Coleman's injuries, and I referenced Jerick McKinnon. He's really the only guy left aside from Jeff Wilson on this roster that could fill that running back role. And if I'm looking at the backs that I can grab off waivers this week, which, it seems like with all the injuries, the waiver wire's relatively stacked, especially if you're playing in a shallower league. But, I think Jerick McKinnon has to be in the same discussion as guys like Mike Davis, Darrell Henderson, et cetera, for, sort of your week 3 priority on the waiver wire. Now, do I see Jerick McKinnon handling bell cow duties here for the Niners while Coleman and Mostert heal up? No way. But could he be a 12 to 15 touch guy with a nice weekly PPR floor? Sure, I'll take it, man. Now, we know Shanahan's affinity for running backs and sort of their collective success at every stop he's made in his NFL coaching career. I take a shot at Jerick McKinnon, man. I'd be happy with an RB2 for the next 2 to 3 weeks while Mostert and Coleman heal up. And really the whole 49ers team gets healthy.
Justin, isn't the Jerick McKinnon story especially with this past week where there was so much bad, but isn't his story just so sort of heartwarming and feel good? I mean, he's been injured for 2 straight seasons. He came over to the Niners. He was considered this fantasy darling. Shanahan's going to make him this stud in the backfield. And then poor guy just could not stay on his feet, could not get on the field. This year he's on the field, but it looks like he's buried behind potentially 3, if not 4 guys. And then here he is, right? I mean, Jerick McKinnon is a fantasy starting running back for the 49ers, and he's going to be like you said, an RB2. And I feel like he is going to be a genuine RB2 while these guys are out. And that's a good story all the way around.
Yeah, it's amazing how an injury to the guy or a couple guys in front of a guy on a depth chart can really ascend them into fantasy relevance, right? I mean, we didn't think that we'd be talking about Jerick McKinnon this year as a starting running back. We didn't think we'd be talking about guys like Mike Davis as a starting running back, but here we are, man. Especially after this past Sunday, it's crazy how guys that are otherwise not really talked about, they can immediately ascend into immediate RB2, RB3 production.
Well, Justin, not for nothing, but I do want to pitch our car ride to Maine segment in the NFC where I did have Jerick McKinnon as my 49er sleeper this year. So I'm just so happy he's getting the chance at doing this. He's looked good in the receiving game and on the ground. Is he otherworldly? No. But is he a good, consistent running back? Yes, he is. And it's just great to see him getting a chance.
Yeah, it is great for him. And, while we're on the topic of running backs going down, Corey, why don't you talk to us about the New York Giants?
Yeah, Justin, I think it's time. I think it's Devonta Freeman time. And look, you cannot be happy if you're a football fan to see Saquon Barkley go down. He is a great talent. He is someone who makes football better when he's on the field. But I pretty much anywhere I could, Justin, you know this because you're in a couple leagues with me. I scooped up Devonta Freeman anywhere I could because I just watched his tape last year, and I felt like Devonta Freeman still has something to give to the fantasy football community and to football in general. So here he was kind of biding his time. He had situations with Philly and he had situations with Jacksonville where maybe he could have signed, but he sort of held out. And it seems like it may have paid off because I think we're about to see him take over the role for the New York Giants. Now, look, this was clearly not their plan A. This is definitely their plan B in Devonta Freeman. And some are going to downplay this, but I don't think Freeman's cooked. Like I said, I think he has more to offer. Last year, he demonstrated a little bit of shake and shimmy, and if we've learned anything from Gurley being stifled at Atlanta, is the running back to blame in the Atlanta Falcons system? I don't know. Gurley got stuffed. Freeman was stuffed last year. Maybe it's more about the system there and not so much about the talent. I am looking forward to seeing Freeman play in New York. I don't think he's startable this week. I think you get him. I think you stash him. I think Freeman sees the field, but it will be probably behind Deion Lewis this week. But after that, I think he's too talented of a guy. I think he's going to get every opportunity in the world. Are the Giants an exciting team? Not necessarily. But as a running back, a starting running back on a football team, something you want to consider, especially when they can look as good as Devonta Freeman has in the past. Oh, yeah, I'm excited. He's my number one waiver ad if he's out there. But like I said, Justin, in any league I'm in, he's not out there because he's already on my roster.
Yeah, you got to be patient with Freeman, I think. It's not going to be an immediate sort of return on the waiver wire pickup or the late draft investment that you may have made on Devonta Freeman, but it's great, man. I mean, for Devonta Freeman, I mean, he waited for the perfect timing, right? I mean, with all the injuries we had this past Sunday, he waited, found a situation that he liked, the New York Giants situation, and yeah, I mean, give it a few weeks, and Devonta Freeman could very well see 15 plus touches a week, and he could be very usable RB2, RB3 on a weekly basis. I could see it.
Yeah, and I think he has a higher ceiling. I mean, I know that maybe shooting for the moon, but at the same time, we've seen him do it, and he's a talented guy, and this is a system that likes to use its running back, both as runners and as pass catchers. So very excited to see what happens with Devonta Freeman. I am tempering my expectations this week, Justin, but I am not tempering them into the future. And speaking of the future, why don't you talk to me about something that you're going to be looking at this week, and it has to do with another exciting rookie runner for us to talk about.
Yeah, I want to talk about Antonio Gibson and his role on the Washington football team here. Now, one of the things that I'm looking for when I'm looking at, sort of later running backs, rookies, is the trend as it relates to their playing time and their integration into their offense. And with Antonio Gibson, it was incredibly encouraging in week 2 to see his snap share go from 25% in week 1 to over 60% in week 2. And I watched some of his tape this afternoon, and man, I was encouraged. I really was. I mean, we all know the hype was out of control towards the end of August with Gibson, right? He was going in some drafts in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, which just seemed crazy for a guy that was a rookie who was in a relatively crowded backfield situation. But you know what, man? The trend in snap share is incredibly encouraging. This week, he had 13 carries for 55 yards. He also scored his first pro touchdown there on a nice shifty 11-yard run towards the goal line. Now, the game script did get away from the Washington football team slightly as they got down big against the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. But, again, what did we see on tape? I saw a lot of what we were preaching this offseason. I saw shiftiness, I saw contact balance, and I saw a whole heck of a lot of strength out of this guy. Man, I tell you what, if he's going to be getting 60+% of the snaps in this offense, I like it a lot, man. I think he's going to be a weekly low-end RB2 from here on out. And speaking of rookie runners, Corey, why don't you talk to us about a Jacksonville Jaguar rookie running back?
Yeah, not just talking about rookie runners, but another one of those rookie runners, Justin, who has not been highly touted all throughout the offseason. This is a guy who kind of came out of nowhere. And I got a question for you, Justin. Is James Robinson legit? Because the numbers look good, but let's talk about what he looks like. Robinson, Justin, he looks good. He's not otherworldly. He's not some superstar. I don't even necessarily think he's an RB1 in the making, but he looks really, really solid. It's been a super solid showing in these first 2 weeks. Again, like I said, I don't think we're looking at a future 3-down start, but Jacksonville seems to like what they see, don't they? I mean, they're definitely not letting Chris Thompson take over his role, and I don't see Raquel Armstead knocking him out either. They just haven't yet, and I don't think they will. And I really think he can get better, and I think we might be seeing the emergence of a new fantasy football RB2, Justin.
Yeah, how funny is it that after Fournette was traded to the Bucs, everyone ran out and tried to grab Rock Armstead and Zigbo, and come to find out that was the wrong pickup. It's James Robinson who's producing RB2 numbers week in and week out here for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
So, Justin, there we go, right? Our week 3 show for the 2020 season is now in the books. And next week, we continue our weekly seasonal episodes, recapping week 3 and getting you ready for week 4. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell, download, follow, like, comment, anything you can do to show some support. I'm Corey.
And I'm Justin.
And this has been the 4th and Long Fantasy Football Show. Good luck in week 3, everyone.
Royalty-free music courtesy of Ben Sound. The views and opinions expressed on today's episode are that of the 4th and Long Fantasy Football Show. Remember to like and subscribe.